I'm Michael Rickards, the Executive Director of the Hall Institute for Public Policy, and this is the Hall Public Forum. And I'm delighted today to have as our guest Dr. Joseph Marbach, Professor of Political Science. All of you know his work on New Jersey politics, and of course currently the Provost at his alma mater, LaSalle University. He used to be the Dean of Arts and Sciences at Seton Hall University. What's it like to go home again?
Oh, it's been great. The reception I've gotten has been very warm, and it really is a homecoming in many ways.
Now, you were a dean how many years at Seton Hall?
I was the dean for 4 years before moving on.
And then you were in the political science department, an expert on New Jersey politics.
Right. I was
now, because you work because you cross the river and work in Philadelphia, even though you live in Jersey, have you lost your ability to be a true commentator on New Jersey politics?
Well, I don't think I've lost it, but I've diminished the capacity to a certain extent. The obligations of being a provost and the learning curve that's involved have really taken a lot of my time away from what would have been normally studying and following what's going on across the street.
How does it look across the river?
Well, I think in some sense what New Jersey tackled earlier on through a lot of Governor Christie's tactics with regard to civil unions, the unions and teachers seem to be a little bit better than what's going on in Pennsylvania, where they've got a tremendous budget gap. They're looking at $4 to $5 billion, and aid to education is being slashed across the board.
Now, these cuts that we're seeing, almost every major state in the union is having economic problems, including those that were once fairly prosperous, including this one. Does it represent just the downturn in the economy, or is it really the bankruptcy of American liberalism?
I think it's a combination of the two, but the downturn in the economy has really exacerbated it. That we've had governments that seem to operate without any real regard to long-term implications of the policies that they would enact. And certainly in New Jersey, we saw that with budget gimmicks every year, and every governor going back to, I think even to Tom Kean, coming up with some kind of budget gimmick to balance the budget, whether it's raiding the pension system or some other type of tactic, such as increasing benefits to state workers because they're going to vote for you, a la Don DeFrancesco. It's really been short-sighted and narrow-minded, and in a sense hurt the way we govern and can govern in the future.
Have we come to the point where we just cannot expect government to do so much for us that in fact we've reached a point where there are limits, and that we have to acknowledge those limits? We have to acknowledge a contraction of the welfare state.
I think so. I think given the context of American politics and the emphasis on individualism and the responsibility of the individual as opposed to collective actions and a sense of taking care of larger issues in society, I think as the pendulum swung and there's a more conservative underlying root out there, that we have come to identify there are certain limits, and now it's the question of what exactly are those limits and what services are we willing to pay for.
Now, you were for a while the chairman, the president of the New Jersey Political Science Association, and just finished your meeting a little while ago. Mm-hmm. And what are the major topics of concern that you focused on and that you saw other people focusing on?
We ran sessions that looked at a review of the governor's first year in office and some of his successes and the challenges that he's going to continue to face. We looked at the impact that redistricting is going to have on the state. You know, as you know, we're losing a seat in Congress, right, and that's going to inevitably pit one incumbent against another, so who's vulnerable. And we then looked at the impact of the congressional elections nationally. So we looked at, it was really in the Northeast that our pollsters came to talk about. So they were quite broad range of issues, and a number of perspectives were really presented. It was a very stimulating conference.
Now, Patrick Murphy, the pollster up at Monmouth University, has done a kind of interesting redistricting proposals. And one of them has, New Jersey looks like a barrel with stripes across the barrel indicating the congressional districts, especially until you get where population is very dense in the northeast corridor of our state. Does that make much sense to have districts that are that long, as long as you can get in a small state like this?
I don't think it does, especially as those strips of population include very diverse populations. You know, there's this sense of having communities being represented and clustered as best as possible so that the members of Congress can best represent that particular perspective. There is another argument, though, that would state that it's better to have a diverse district, because then you would have less polarization in the congressman or congresswoman's perspective, because they have to represent a rural and an urban area, and they have to balance the interests, whites and blacks, Latinos, those sorts of interests. So
with the Salmores, Steve and Barbara, Steve of course passed away, you were considered probably the best known, I would guess, of the commentators dealing with with the New Jersey politics. Who do you see left? Who's going to be left standing, and who's going to be gone when we redistrict Congress?
I think that seniority will play a role, and I think they'll look at the Runyon seat and try to figure out how they can pit him against either another Republican.
Now, the Runyon seat is
in South Jersey. It's
that's the one that used to be held by Adler?
It was the Adler seat, right.
So he's only been there 2 years.
Right, and so, yeah, and Runyon just was sworn in January.
Just elected,
so,
right.
Yeah, so he'll only be in for 2 years, and I think if the powers that be can pit Lance, the other Republican who's only been in for 4 years now, I think, against Runyon, that would be a Democrat's dream, because then the Republicans would lose a seat and the Democrats would maintain the Senate.
Lance represents
kind of the central part of Jersey, just kind of borders on to the congressional district where Runyon is.
Okay. So they would try to pit him so that if we do take a loss, the Democrats would want.
I don't know how realistic that is going to be, though, because
it's pretty diverse.
And the population shift has been towards the south.
Right.
So, you know, if you were looking at some of the maps that Patrick has drawn and was designed to create a competitive district or a truly constitutional district, we probably would be looking at seats in North Jersey and pitting incumbents there, and that would likely be 2 Democrats.
What does that mean? I mean, I understand geographic. Constitutional means what? The notion of having contiguous
and compact
districts. What about eliminating the district or dividing up the district that Chris Smith is in?
That's a possibility, I suppose, and that might pit Smith against Runyon.
Smith goes from Hamilton
down into Burlington
way over,
County. I think even parts of Camden County and Pennsauken, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And Runyon is the other parts of Burlington County, so you could draw a district that would pit them against each other. I also believe that in our conference, one of the analysts mentioned that the residencies of Lance and Runyon are relatively close. So you could draw a district that includes both of them, and then they would be pitted against each other that way, and it might actually create an open seat somewhere else in South Jersey.
You don't have to live, though, in your district to run for Congress.
No, you don't. You just have to live in the state.
Yeah.
But there's a sense that
people want to see you.
People want to see you. But, you know, it hasn't hurt Chris Smith, who raises his family in Virginia, but maintains an apartment somewhere here in, I think, Robbinsville.
Yeah, Robbinsville. As you look at New Jersey politics, and now you have obviously comparative perspective of Pennsylvania politics, are we any more crazy than the rest of the country? Or we just seem to be?
Well, I think our election cycle puts us at the forefront much more frequently than the other states that have an election cycle that's every even year for state elections and local elections. Whereas in New Jersey, we have those odd year elections, so we follow the presidential cycle with a gubernatorial cycle, and we get a lot of attention. You know, in those off-year elections, it's Virginia and New Jersey that have the elections, and they get the attention. So we get that kind of focal point. And so it's given Governor Christie, for example, a year head start over the other Republican governors who were just elected, and it allows him to say, yes, see, I set the tone, and now all these other individuals are following my blueprint.
How does the governor look to you after a year or so?
Well, I think
2 years.
Yeah, it'll be 14 months. I think that they've said he seems to be on track with his particular agenda of cutting government and cutting spending and reducing the size of government. I think he's going to hit a critical mass, though, where he starts to cut and there isn't much fat left, and he starts to cut into muscle and the bones, and then people are going to start to say, is this really what I want to see? And I think that's when we're going to talk about whether it's the crisis of American liberalism or the crisis of government expectations and what people are willing to pay. If they start to see the quality of schools decline, if they see the quality of local services decline, there could be a backlash because the governor has put himself front and center as the lead cost cutter, and there would be a natural reaction. So I think, you know, unless we have a significant economic turnaround where people can say they're feeling good about their own security and selves, that, you know, a lot of these efforts could backfire against the governor.
Now, property taxes were supposed to be capped at 2%. The latest study that I saw was that property taxes in New Jersey went up to about 4.5%.
You know, the law to cap property taxes had a number of loopholes, or allowing localities and school districts to spend more if existing contracts went into effect and there were pensions that had to be paid, or there were other emergency spending that was involved. And I also think it had something to do with the size of the district if it happened to grow. So, you know, these types of laws to artificially limit property taxes generally don't work. And even what the governor's talking about, reducing the aid to municipalities, without the so-called toolkit, municipalities won't be able to keep their expenses down. They just don't have the legal ability when they negotiate with their workers or have to pay into the pensions or provide services mandated by the state.
Explain to the viewers what the toolkit is and how it's related to the idea of keeping down expenditures.
Well, the toolkit is really a series of public policy options that would be available to local governments to try to reduce the cost of government. So some of it deals with how they can negotiate with local unions and removing arbitration, for example, which often inflates local contracts, and it really ties the hands of some of the local officials. Renegotiating pensions instead of paying into the statewide system, looking at what the private sector has done in terms of 401ks or employee contributions, dealing with healthcare costs for local employees. Those are the sorts of things that are in the toolkit that would allow the local, that free up local government from the state mandates on dealing with local workers by and large. And that's where most of local government's money is spent, on personnel costs.
How did a progressive state, a state with a tradition of decency in its public discourse, become Wisconsin?
And we seem to have been Wisconsin before Wisconsin was Wisconsin.
That's right.
It's troubling because this is not my thought. It was one that was brought up at the conference, that what's happening in Wisconsin and what is pioneered in New Jersey is this middle class being pitted against the middle class. And so the governor has demonized teachers and demonized public employees who make fairly good living, and they receive very good benefits packages. And so it's been that, and I think it's been the benefits package in particular, the pension and the health care, that workers in the private sectors have seen their costs go up and employers passing on costs to the workers. And that seems to have been a trigger, and the governor's tapped into this sense of the grass is always greener on the other side, and so my neighbor is getting better benefits than me, and that ought to be stopped. So he's been successful in this notion of pitting the middle class against itself.
It's interesting to take a look at that and to see, because that's a state that has had a long history of great liberalism, going back to La Follette when he was governor. And it's interesting to take a look at that. And same thing New Jersey, with a great progressive governor who did become President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson. And of course, New York's great progressive tradition, going back to Teddy Roosevelt through Franklin Roosevelt and even beyond. The most impressive governor I ever met was a guy named Nelson Rockefeller. And I always thought he would have either made a great president or an absolutely awful president, but he wouldn't have been in between.
Right, and he didn't get that chance.
Didn't get that chance, no. Now, you were going to write for us a good textbook on politics and government, sort of to succeed the famous Salmore one, which is the standard one. And I know Barbara from graduate school very well. Are we going to get anything from your pen? Can you take an hour a day from being provost to giving us a good New Jersey textbook?
I would hope to, not in the immediate future, though. I'm still scaling that learning curve. And Barbara was at our conference.
Oh, was she?
Yes, and she is busily working on the 4th edition.
Oh, she is?
Of that book, yes. Governor Christie's given her a lot of material.
Yes.
So I don't know if she has a...
She's given all of us a lot of material.
So I don't know if she didn't really mention a time frame for it, so maybe the next 4 years, and then just looking at what goes on there.
It's a good textbook. It's very, very useful.
And I think very accessible, too. I mean, I don't know if your viewers have seen it, but it's written in a way that's not college textbooky, but
that's right.
Really does tell the story.
Yeah, Rutgers University now publishes it. It was part of the Nebraska series.
Right.
On state government.
Right, which I was involved with when I was back at the Center for the Study of Federalism at Temple University.
Okay, those are people.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think it'd be useful if we had New Jersey. I think is always, to me, a great laboratory, a great case study of whatever you're looking at. Wherever the Republic's going, we've been there before. We are the second richest state in the Union, despite what people think in the state. We are a state with pretty much the same ethnic diversity as is growing up, age-wise, for example. New Jersey is about as old as the country is demographically. We have more Hispanics, but that's not true anymore. I mean, the country's changed so enormously.
It's become right.
So New Jersey is becoming a kind of microcosm of the Republic.
And that's a theme I'll bring into the classroom often when I talk about the problems that New Jersey faces are the problems that the rest of the nation will be facing.
That's right.
Particularly in terms of the population distribution and the fact that we're often called the suburban state.
Suburban.
Every square inch is incorporated, and we see our central cities facing the poverty and the economic conditions, and the suburbs now very wealthy but also working class, and we're seeing that more and more across the country.
It's a very, very interesting way of looking at it. Who do you think looks like a good possible contender against Christie for the Democratic Party?
Well, I guess it's Steve Sweeney is kind of positioning himself for that run, and he has
majority leader in the Senate.
Majority leader in the Senate, and he has the backing of folks like George Norcross, who can turn out votes in Camden County and increasingly in Gloucester County and Burlington County, where he made some inroads in recent elections. So Sweeney will come out with a strong South Jersey base, and I'm hard pressed to identify maybe Cory Booker, I guess, is the North Jersey politician who's been identified and who is very savvy with regard to his media skills and maintains those, whether he's tweeting or appearing on late night television and YouTube clips.
He did a great job during the snowstorm. He looked much better than the mayor of New York City.
Yeah, and he got out there, and it's even, there's a very interesting point of comparison, because the governor was in Florida during the snowstorm and missed a golden opportunity to show symbolic leadership and concern, whereas Booker was out on the front lines, shovel in hand. Yeah, so
shoveling with people. Has the media changed New Jersey politics? Jersey used to be the epitome of the machine state. Has the media changed all that?
To some extent, I think it's changed the way campaigns are run. That you can run a statewide campaign, without regard to the local county bosses as they were identified, and turning out the vote. But the county executives, county bosses are still influential. Even though John Corzine had so much money, he won because he was able to spread that money to the counties and get the support that he had in his run for Senate and his first run for governor. It was interesting that he didn't get that kind of support when he ran against Chris Christie, and counties like Camden, notably, and Gloucester County didn't turn out in the numbers they should have, and that was probably the difference in that particular race. Even Bergen County, which Christie nearly won, and should have been overwhelmingly Democratic. So it's changed to some extent. I think what's really the significant change with regard to the media, though, is as we've lost the newspapers and the coverage of local politics, and even the coverage of state politics, as the Star-Ledger and Bergen Record and Asbury Park Press and Gannett Chain have pulled back. People don't know what's going on in state government, and it's disturbing because there's lots of changes that go on, and it affects their lives in ways that may not be very evident, but really does affect the bottom line of how their quality of life is going to be experienced.
And now you're going to lose your state television station.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know what the final plans are going to be.
Alternative funding.
It could be even broken down, right, and sold off in pieces, and maybe the news division will stay intact if there's a cable operator that would be willing to.
Benjamin Franklin once said that New Jersey was like a keg with a tap on either end, and that's true of the media too. That we either get our information from New York City or from Philadelphia.
Right, and my former colleague at Seton Hall, Matt Hale, has been doing studies of New Jersey coverage, and in this part of the state where Philadelphia media dominates, New Jersey gets barely a mention.
So we don't get anything.
Now New York, and particularly I believe it was the NBC affiliate, seemed to pay a lot of attention, or much more attention than the competitors, to New Jersey politics. But even that was limited.
Well, the good thing about Chris Christie, he's gotten us a lot of coverage in the Wall Street Journal, if nothing else.
Nothing else, and on the national television circuit too, whether it's been on Fox or MSNBC or CBS and ABC.
And Chris Smith gets us coverage on EWTN. I'm not quite sure if that serves the needs of the people of New Jersey, the Catholic network. What's interesting as you look back on your long history of really analyzing New Jersey politics, have we really, Joe, changed as a people? Are we still angry about the same thing? Are we still proud of the same thing?
I don't think we've changed all that much. I think, in a sense, New Jersey is sometimes has an inferiority complex because it is that barrel tapped at two ends, and particularly with the relationship in New York. And people are concerned about local issues. They're concerned about their school districts, and they're concerned about local property taxes. Those are the things that still drive us, and we still believe in the notion of home rule, even though it's a fiction, but it's still one that we hold on to dearly. So sometimes the issues may change, but I think they always do come back to Tip O'Neill's famous quote about all politics being local, and I think New Jersey epitomizes that quote.
If you were a young politician running for office in Jersey, what would you pick out as the major issues you want to stress?
Well, I think it would depend on which area one was coming from. You know, if you had a suburban district, you might look at school funding formulas. You know, and if you were coming from an urban district, I think you know, reform and charter schools is really the way to improve that system, because in a sense you're not going to be able to save all the students and children in some of the urban areas because of family structures and support. But if you can save as many as you can, and charter schools offer that opportunity in ways that the public school system doesn't, that would be an issue that I might choose, and we see some of the urban politicians doing that. On the suburban side, it would be more quality of life issues and lowering property taxes in different ways.
Now, you work for a Catholic university. It's run by what, the Salesian, the St. Francis de Sales?
We're
Brothers?
The Christian Brothers.
Christian Brothers, okay. I thought it was the Salesians.
Yeah. We've got 6 colleges in the United States that are Christian Brother affiliates.
Okay. And as you look at that, is there a role for private public higher education, private higher education, where tuition's becoming so terribly expensive, even at public institutions that are heavily subsidized?
Yes, this is a great concern of us. And are we pricing ourselves out of the market? Are we no longer affordable to families? So we are very concerned with that. We've expanded our scholarship programs to make it as affordable as possible to students who are in need. And LaSalle, as a Christian Brother university, is based on the principles of St. John Baptist de LaSalle, who is the patron saint of teachers. And LaSalle took working class children off the streets of France and educated them and taught them skills so that they could be contributing members of society. And that's something that's very important to the LaSallian heritage, that we have relevant education preparing students for the next phase of their lives, whether it's work or graduate school.
Well, you're a great advertisement for your university.
Thank you.
Good to have you back again. It's good to have you back in Jersey, commenting on New Jersey politics. Don't lose interest in us, even though you live in Florence.
I won't. I'm just down the road.
So. Don't lose interest in Jersey. It's still the greatest game around.
I agree.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. My name is Michael Rickards, and we appreciate your being a part of the whole forum.